My name is Beth Stebbins. I do our conventional small grain procurement at grain millers. And then I also organize our different sustainability initiatives. And I'm up in the Twin Cities working remotely out of our Eden Prairie office. I've given this sort of talk a few times before, so if you've heard before, hopefully it'll be something new, but we're just out here trying to spread the good word about oats because, like Matt said, it's a great year to get started in oats if that's something you're interested in. So a little bit about grain millers. We're primarily an oat miller by far. We've got 3 oat mills, one kind of close by in St. Ansgar, Iowa, one out in Eugene, Oregon, and then one up in the heart of oat country in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Got one dry corn mill out in Marion, Indiana, a flax mill in Newton, Wisconsin, and then a couple of cleaning plants, one specializing cleaning flax up in Saskatoon, and then another cleaning facility, used to be a seed facility, I think, up in St. Peter, Minnesota. They do all sorts of different specialty organic stuff up there. So we are at Grain Millers a food ingredient manufacturer primarily. So we're one of those interesting companies that you probably haven't heard of us. You don't see us on the store shelves, but you've probably eaten our food. So our bread and butter, so to speak, is just your rolled oats. So you can find that in ingredients in different granola bars or just in the oat canisters on the shelf. A big growing business for us is oat milk. So we sell whole oat oats to, say, Oatly for them to treat further and make into oat milk. And then all sorts of different things. So our dry corn milk can go into cornbread or different sorts of snacks. Other small grains get flaked like oats to go into hot cereals or bread toppings. Quite a
There we go. We just lost
Sorry.
you for one second. That's what.
Got muted there somehow. So like I mentioned, our closest mill is in St. Ansgar, Iowa, about 40 miles from Albert Lea. We mill 6 different small grains there. So the largest being oats, followed by soft white wheat, barley, rye, hard red wheat, and triticale. And of those, we do organic and conventional of most of those grains. So a lot of different stuff going on there. We've got 2 million bushels of storage capacity, which somehow never seems like enough. And we employ about 160 people in the local area. So kind of getting in the details of what grain millers is like to work with as a farmer. I know a lot of folks are more familiar selling to the local elevator where they can kind of just show up with a load of corn and dump it and be on their way. Selling to grain millers is a little bit different. So I like to try to go over how that's different than selling to an elevator. So the first step is to write a contract. And it's up to a grower if they want to forward contract. So set the price this time of year or wait until about harvest time. I know a lot of folks like to wait until they have the grain in the bin to write a contract just so they can make sure they fill it. But something we do at grain millers, we have a full act of God clause for all of our new crop contracts. And that's because we know a lot of folks are either new to oats or can be a little nervous about it. So if you don't make grade, we can cancel the contract. If you don't get as many bushels as you're expecting, get hailed out. It's pretty risk-free to forward contract. So it's just a matter of when you want to lock in your price. The next step after you grow your oats is to submit a sample. So you do have to bin your oats if you grow for us. And we like to see a sample of the oats before a truck shows up. The reason being is we are a food grade facility and just have pretty stringent quality requirements. So we like to see a sample so that we know oats will generally make grade before a truck arrives. And that kind of has another advantage too, that if we see what your grades look like before a truck arrives, we can maybe give you some suggestions to, say, put your oats on air for a little bit or load with the vac to try to bring up your test weight a few pounds. And that helps minimize rejections and discounts down the line, which makes everybody happy. So then once your sample is approved, which takes about 2 weeks in the height of harvest time, you can either deliver your oats yourself or we can arrange for pickup. We do like to offer on-farm bids to our growers. I can't say 100% that we're always able to do that, but most of the time we can arrange on-farm pickup if you're further away or aren't able to deliver. So some advantages of domestic oats, they're kind of good for everybody in the value chain. So our customers like buying domestic oats from us just from that storytelling aspect. They like being connected with the farmers and being able to say that they're buying oats produced nearby where food is being consumed. For us as a grain processor, there's shorter transit. So I mean, we love Canadian oats and they're in generally speaking really good quality. But say if we have rail issues or rail cars are being slow, we like to have the option of just being able to pull in some domestic oats really quick on trucks. And for you, the growers, there's great benefits to soil health to adding in that third crop, breaking up the pest cycle. It can help your corn and bean yields down the line. So it's just a really good thing to try to incorporate into your system. So speaking of which, I hear from a lot of growers that they can't grow quality oats in the Midwest. And from what we found, you really can, but you have to treat your oats like a cash crop. I don't want to step on Ben's toes here at all, so I'll kind of just give a broad overview, and I'm sure you can speak much further on each of these things, but variety selection is key when you're planting oats. So we have our grain millers recommend varieties on the screen here, and if anybody would like a copy of this, feel free to email me and I can send this out. And these are just the varieties that we found that performed well in the past year and did really well making test weight. You are not obligated to plant one of these varieties if you grow for us, and we will purchase pretty much any variety as long as it meets our specs. But these are just what we found to work out well for the last crop year. If you're putting in oats, you want to plant them as early as you can. Oats don't like being too hot, so the earlier you get them in, the sooner they'll get out of that grain fill stage, hopefully before it gets too hot in the summer. Generally speaking, it's recommended you don't plant oats back to back with other cereals to kind of just minimize disease risk. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule, but just something that's generally recommended. And then something else I often hear is, do I have to swath my oats? No, you don't have to swath your oats, because I know a lot of folks don't have the equipment for that. You can definitely straight cut your oats. Just make sure you are able to put them on air to get them below 14% moisture. Because my last point, you want to make sure you're below that 14% for storage. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of having grain that might have an off smell or something. And since we're a food grade facility, that's something we can't take in. Kind of an overview of our specs. 38 pounds is our spec for test weight. We will take down to 36 pounds with about a 20-cent discount. And I would say meeting test weight is probably the most challenging spec. New growers are able to do it all the time, as long as they kind of follow the pointers I outlined earlier on. Some years the weather just doesn't cooperate and you aren't able to make that spec, but we have growers in Iowa who have grown for us for years who have consistently been able to make test weight. So it can be done. 14% is our max moisture. I think we take discounts above 13.5%, but above 14%, it's an automatic rejection. And then 3% max foreign material. It's usually not an issue for conventional oats. 20% max spins, kind of the same thing. And then we have a 1.0 parts per million limit on vomitoxin or DON. That's oftentimes, that's usually not an issue on our oats. And then if we do come in above 1 part per million, we are often able to still take oats in anyway, as long as we can see that the vomitoxin is concentrated in the groat, not the hull, which is usually the case. So now a few words on the current oat markets. If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me if the price is going to go up or down, I probably wouldn't be working for grain millers, but I can talk to you a little bit about the factors that are affecting the current oat prices. So as we probably most of us know, most of our milling oats, even going into our Iowa mill, come out of Canada. And I've got a moisture map of the soils up in Canada on the slide here. So this is as of November 1st, 2021. And you can see the major oat growing regions on there. centered in Saskatchewan, where our main mill up there is located and where we get most of our oats. And you can see that is mostly in the very dry region. So this last summer, they had a very bad drought up in Canada that resulted in near record low ending stocks expected in the end of 2021 crop year. So because of supply and demand, that kind of is pushing the price up. And then up in Canada, now because of that, they're expecting second highest level of seeded acres since 2009. So because of that, the Canadian oat supplies is projected to increase by 40% for the next crop year. Now, that being said, this is all what is expected and projected. The X factor is always the weather. If we see good moisture in the Canadian prairies this summer, the oat price maybe will be peaking now and will come down come harvest time. But on the flip side, if we see another dry summer up there, maybe what we're seeing now is maybe we've seen nothing yet, and we'll be talking about $7 or $8 oats. I think that'd be nuts, but who knows what'll happen. But I think long story short, what you can expect to happen in the oat markets is mainly dictated by the moisture level up there in Canada. So that being said, our current oat bids, at the moment, we do not have a bid, and that's not a reflection of the market at all. The reason behind that is we started coming out buying oats for a new crop a lot earlier than normal. We started in about November. I think typically we start in about January. And that's because, like I said, ending stocks were expected to be really low. We wanted to start getting contracted out there, and we came out with some pretty good price. So we peaked at that $6 a bushel for harvest delivery, $7 for our latest delivery window of April through June. Our last indication was $5.50 for harvest delivery, $6.50 for April through June. And that's when we kind of paused on bidding. And we will be back in the market. It's just a matter of making sure our sales team is selling the oats that we have contracted at these higher prices. We don't want to go super long at $6.50 and then have the oat market come crashing down. So what I'm doing is I have a bid list that I put together, and every time we have when we have our bid out, or in the future when we change our bid, I just send an email to that list. So if you want to get on that, just shoot me an email, and I'll put that in the chat afterward too. So if anyone wants to get on that, they can just contact me there. Other small grains that we do in St. Ansgar, like I kind of mentioned earlier. Of these, barley is a pretty good opportunity for folks in this area. That we do a really large amount of barley at our mill. I know it can be difficult to grow in this area. It seems like, from my perspective, which is a very limited sample size, it seems to be 50-50 on any given year if growers can meet our specification. The major issue for that I see is vomitoxin. It just seems to be too humid in the summer and can cause issues with vomitoxin barley. But looks like somebody else is talking about that later, so maybe there's some insight on how we can successfully grow barley in this area. But if that's something you're interested in or are putting in, definitely contact me and we can provide a market for you. Soft white wheat, we pretty much buy out west. Hard red wheat, we use winter and spring wheat interchangeably. That's because we flake the wheat kind of like a rolled oat, so we don't really have a protein spec. And it just depends on the year which type of wheat we like to buy. If vomitoxin isn't an issue, we usually go for winter wheat because it tends to be cheaper. But if it's a high dawn year, we usually have to get into that spring wheat market. So again, if that's something you're interested in, give me a shout. Rye is probably what I receive the most phone calls on. Those folks at KWS do a great job at marketing hybrid rye. We only go through about a handful of loads per month on that. So it's kind of competitive to get a contract on that. But definitely feel free to contact me if that's something you have on the ground. And then triticale, I really have a hard time buying in this area because, again, vomitoxin seems to be an issue. But if it's something people have, I'll definitely be interested. But unfortunately, I usually have to source that out of Canada. So just a couple plugs on why growing for us is awesome. We have on-farm pricing available. Like I mentioned, we can usually arrange to pick up off the farm if you're a little bit further away or don't want to deliver it yourself. We have agronomic assistance available. So we have a couple of agronomists on staff who will answer all your questions about oats, since we know a lot of folks are new to it. And then we have an intern in the summer who can come out and visit and help you scout or answer any questions if that's something you need. We have forward contracts available, so you can kind of lock in your pricing and get an idea of what your cash flow would be at harvest. And then we have a couple customer opportunities, which I think are kind of neat, which I'll kind of end on. First one is a small grains cost share. So this is administered by Practical Farmers of Iowa, and funding for it is provided by Oatly, which is one of our big oat milk customers. And they fund it because they want to see us buy more domestic oats and want to see growers put in cover crops and just be able to connect to the farmers and their supply chain. So it's available to growers, not just in Iowa, but also Minnesota, Illinois, Nebraska, not the Dakotas, but probably most folks in this meeting would be eligible for it, geographically speaking. And there's a couple options in the cost share. So the first is just a straightforward cover crop cost share, where you receive $15 an acre for harvesting a small grain and planting a legume containing cover crop. And then the other cost share is to reduce your nitrogen application following a small grain and a cover crop. So you can either reduce your application by 40 units or apply under 100 units of nitrogen. And the neat thing is these programs can be combined, so you can plant a small grain and a cover crop on your acreage this year and receive $15. And then next year on those same acres, reduce your nitrogen input and receive another $15 per acre. Lastly, everyone's favorite buzzword, carbon. Everyone seems to be talking about carbon right now, but the opportunities we have in carbon are a little different. So I think it's been kind of found out that oats offer a pretty unique opportunity to be grown carbon negatively. And some of our customers have noticed this and are using it as an opportunity to inset their emissions in their food production. So that kind of cuts out a lot of the red tape of having to generate and sell a carbon credit, since everything is kept within the same value chain. So the way this works and the way we do it is, instead of providing a price per ton or per acre on carbon, we just add a premium to our oat price to growers who are shown to grow carbon negative oats. And this is done through modeling and through a lot of data input that's way above my head. But we're kind of looking for growers who use general regenerative principles. So no-till, cover crops, extended rotations, and then other strategies that can reduce carbon. So precision fertilizer application, compost, that sort of thing. And this is, right now we're working with a brand of post called Airly, which their claim to fame is that they advertise that every box of crackers sequesters a certain amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So kind of a cool project to see how your oats can end up in a box of crackers. But in this area, we have found so far the soil type can be really limiting for growers to be carbon negative. We haven't had a lot of success in Minnesota and Iowa yet. We mostly are working up in Canada and in South Dakota. But I'm sure at some point down the line, we'll get into this area. We just need the right growers and the right set of practices and the right location, since soil type is such a big contributing factor. That's all I got today. There's my contact info. And like I said, I will put my email in the chat box for anybody who wants to get on my bid list. I promise I won't spam you too hard and only send you nice emails. But that's all I got for today. Any questions?
Great. Thanks so much, Beth. Really appreciate the time and putting in the effort on the presentation and joining us today. Really appreciate it. I know
of course.
Kind of a hot topic for folks, as you can well imagine. I'm sure your inbox has been flooded the last 3 months or so.
Absolutely.
I know you work more with conventional oats, but are there organic oat bids currently out there too, or has that kind of been closed off as well?
Yeah, I do believe we have bids for deferred periods. And if anybody is looking for information on that, my colleague Richie has bids on that, so they can shoot me an email and I can forward that along. But yeah, I think we do have some bids for next spring still available.
Gotcha. And there was another question that came in about pre-harvest desiccants. I'm assuming gentleman's talking about Roundup. Is there any restrictions or anything along those lines, or as long as you're
Yep.
making sure it's fine?
Right. So we don't allow the use of any pre-harvest desiccant. Anything applied to oats must be followed or must follow label instructions, which in the US, pre-harvest desiccation isn't allowed. And that's just because we found it affects the milling quality of the oats, causes them to shatter when they're milled.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. I didn't actually know that. Great. Yeah. So thank you again so much for taking the time and putting together the presentation. As Beth said, she'll be dropping her contact info in the chat. So if anybody wants to follow up, you can look forward to another 300 emails by the end of the day today.
Awesome. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.